Grandpa, a small voice behind me, barely louder than the crackle of the wood stove. Tonight, my mom and dad are gonna take your money. The words came out soft, too soft for an 8-year-old. Soft in a way that told me he didn't just hear something, he saw it. I didn't turn right away. I just stared into the fire, watching the orange glow dance across the bricks I laid with my own hands years ago. My slippers were still warm. My tea was still steaming. The night was quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, I felt the shift. Not the kind you hear, the kind you know. I finally looked at him. Small face, big eyes, fingers twisted in the hem of his shirt. Fear shaped into the body of a child. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to, because somewhere inside me, I already knew this night would come. My name is Henry Warren. I'm 52 years old, and everything I own, everything I built, everything I sacrificed my youth for, sits under this roof. I wasn't born into money. I wasn't even born into comfort. I grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were expensive and food was cheap. At 17, I was working construction under the table, lifting steel beams heavier than my future. I built calluses before I built plans. I saved before I slept. I kept going when every part of me wanted to sit down and breathe. By 30, I saved enough to buy a small piece of land and build my own house, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. No help, no loans, no family inheritance, just my hands, my sweat, and a pain in my lower back that still reminds me where I came from. By 40, I owned a business. Nothing fancy, but honest, solid. The kind of business that makes enough to live and enough to be tempted. And that's where it started. My son, Michael, charming, good smile, quick talker, always knew how to get what he wanted by sounding smarter than everyone else. His wife, Leela, polished, always dressed like she was on her way to somewhere better than where she was standing. Her eyes never looked at things, only at what they could be turned into. For years, I thought it was normal. They visited, we ate dinner, we talked. But one day, the conversations changed. They became curious. What accounts I held, what the business made, what my retirement plan looked like, where the documents were kept. And I remember the moment my gut tapped me on the shoulder, just like yours probably has once or twice, when they stopped asking how I was doing and started asking what I was leaving. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched. Quietly. Because I learned something over the years. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to prepare. So I made changes. Legal ones. Silent ones. Ones nobody knew about. Not even my grandson. I thought I had time. Time before they tried to take what was mine. But then came tonight. That whisper.
His little hand gripping my sleeve, his eyes wet, scared, certain. "Grandpa, they're waiting for you to fall asleep." The fire crackled, the house breathed, and I felt the entire world tilt. I placed my hand on his shoulder, calm, steady, quiet. Because if there's one thing you should remember, a storm doesn't warn you before it hits, but I have weathered storms before. Tonight would not be the night I lost everything. I told him to sit beside me, not with words, just a small pat on the couch cushion. He climbed up quietly, like he already knew silence was safer tonight. The house was still. No voices, no footsteps, but I could feel them on the other side of the hallway, waiting like shadows, pretending to be family. Kids don't lie about things like this. They don't invent fear. Fear is something they learn by watching. I stared at the fire a moment longer, letting the flames settle inside me instead of panic. "Where did you hear it?" "Not loud, just steady." He pointed toward the kitchen with one small finger. "They were talking. They thought I was sleeping." His voice trembled, but he kept going. "They said, after you take your medicine, you'll be tired, and then Dad will bring the papers, and Mom said to make you sign before morning." My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. Age teaches you to bleed on the inside, quietly. I knew exactly what papers they meant. The transfer documents. The ones that would move everything. The business, the land, the house, into their names. Documents I had already replaced. Signed? Yes. But what they didn't know is that signatures don't always sign away what you think they do. Sometimes they sign a trap. But hearing it come from the mouth of a child I loved, that was the part that stung. Not the betrayal, not the greed, but the fact that they let him hear it. That they didn't care if he understood what stealing felt like. I placed my hand on the back of his head, slow, gentle, like I was holding something too fragile to ever drop. I whispered, "You did the right thing coming to me." Not praise, not comfort, just truth. He leaned into me, and for a moment we just breathed. Two hearts in one room, listening for footsteps that never came, because they were waiting for the house to settle, waiting for me to grow tired, waiting to strike when I was weakest. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that I don't sleep early. Not anymore. Not after a lifetime of early mornings and late nights.
I stood up slowly, not hurried, not afraid. Went to the window, pulled the curtain just enough to look outside. Both their cars were still in the driveway, lights off, engine quiet. Meaning one thing, they weren't leaving until this was done. I didn't sigh, I didn't curse, I didn't feel sorry for myself. If anything, I felt the same feeling I had when I was 20, standing on a construction beam 3 stories high, nothing but air and risk beneath me. Focused, awake, alive. I turned back to my grandson. "You're going to sleep in my room tonight," I said softly. His eyes widened. He understood. I didn't need to explain. Not tonight. Because tonight wasn't about inheritance, or houses, or bank accounts. Tonight was about teaching him what a legacy actually is. Not something you steal, something you protect. He took my hand as we walked down the hallway. The wooden floor creaked, the same creak they were probably listening for. But I wasn't walking to hide. I was walking to prepare. Because if they wanted war, they chose the wrong night. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The hallway felt longer that night. Not because of its size, but because of the weight of what waited at the end of it. Every picture frame on the wall seemed to watch us, memories frozen from a time when family still meant trust, not calculation. My grandson held my hand tighter the closer we got to my room. Not out of fear of the dark, but fear of them. Children don't say it, but their silence tells the whole story. We entered my room. I closed the door. Not with a slam, but with the quiet, certain click of a man who has made up his mind. I knelt to his level, eye to eye. "You're safe here," I told him. That wasn't reassurance. That was a promise, and I've never broken one in 52 years of breathing. He nodded once, and then did something that nearly broke me in half. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Small, creased, handwritten. "I took this," he whispered. They were making a list. I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a list of items. It wasn't numbers. It was instructions. Step 1. Give him the pills. Step 2. Wait 20 minutes. Step 3. Bring documents. Step 4. Sign. Step 5. Move him to guest room. Not help him, not take care of him, just move him, like a belonging, like a relic they no longer needed on display. I felt something press against my chest. Not anger, not disbelief, just a quiet, ancient ache. Because this wasn't about property anymore. This was about erasing me while I was still alive. I folded the paper back, placed it on the bedside table. "Listen to me," I said, steady as stone. "When I tell you to lie down, you lie down. When I tell you not to speak, you don't speak. When I move, you move. Understand?" He nodded. No hesitations, no questions. The kind of obedience that comes from trust, not fear. I sat down beside him, the mattress dipping gently beneath my weight. And in that moment, the past rushed back, uninvited, but familiar. I remembered the nights I stayed awake building this home, board by board, while my son slept warm and fed. I remembered skipping meals so he could finish school with new shoes instead of shame. I remembered working double shifts so his future didn't have to look like mine. Funny how children don't remember the sacrifices, only the inheritance. I used to think raising a child meant giving him everything I never had. Now I realize the mistake. Giving someone everything is the fastest way to teach them nothing. Outside the bedroom door, I heard it. A soft floorboard. A gentle step. Not walking toward us. Positioning. They were waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right weakness. The right opening. But the thing about people who wait for weakness is they forget one truth. Some of us were built in storms. We don't break. We sharpen. I leaned back, resting my hand on my grandson's shoulder, not to calm him, but to remind him he wasn't alone. The night was no longer theirs. It was mine. The house had a different kind of silence now. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that waits, listens, calculates. A silence that belonged to people who believed they were in control. I sat there a moment longer, one hand resting on my grandson's shoulder, steady as breath. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't nervous. I was remembering. Because every battle is won long before it begins, in the planning, the patience, the choosing of the moment. And I had done my preparing quietly months ago. I stood, slow and deliberate, and walked to the old oak dresser near the window. The same dresser I built when I was 25 years ago, before the business, before the land, before any of this mattered more than simply surviving the week. I opened the bottom drawer, not the top where people assume valuables sit, but the one most overlook. Inside was a small lockbox, nothing fancy, scratched from years of being moved, opened, and closed. I didn't open it yet. It wasn't time. I just placed it on the dresser, where it could be seen. My grandson watched me, wide-eyed but silent, understanding more through my stillness than through any explanation. There are moments when words only dilute the truth. This was one of those.
I walked to my closet next and pulled down an old wool coat, the kind that looks too heavy to wear indoors. But inside, in the inner lining, sewn in years ago, was an envelope. Not hidden to deceive, hidden to protect. Inside that envelope were the real papers, the ones my son believed he could force me to sign tonight, already completed, filed, and secured with names he didn't know and couldn't touch. My legacy had already been moved far beyond the reach of greed. Yet I didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. This was something colder, quieter. The acceptance that sometimes blood betrays itself. I placed the coat gently over the chair. Then, a sound. Not loud, not obvious. A glass being placed on a countertop. The faint clink carried through the hall. They were preparing. I could picture it without seeing it. Leela checking her reflection, smoothing her hair, preparing her practiced expression of concern. Michael pacing slightly, convincing himself this was justified, necessary, even righteous. People don't call their own actions greed while doing them. They rename it responsibility, family decision, future planning. But a thief with a reason is still just a thief.
I sat back down on the edge of the bed, my grandson leaning against me, his breathing small and uneven. He wasn't scared for himself. Children rarely are. He was scared for me, and that was the part that cut deeper than betrayal ever could. I brushed his hair back gently, the same way I used to brush his father's when he was small enough to fit in the crook of my arm. Back then, I thought love alone could shape a life. But love without boundaries turns into permission, and permission becomes entitlement. And entitlement steals. Down the hallway, another sound. This time, a whisper. Too soft to make out words, but loud enough to know the decision had already been made. They would come soon. Not shouting, not dramatic. They would come with soft voices and serious expressions, the performance of concern. They would act like they were helping me. That was always the plan. I rested both feet on the floor, grounding myself, feeling the weight of every year, every scar, every lesson I had carried to reach this moment. I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to be still. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is simply not move when others expect him to fall. I waited. The steps in the hallway started, slow, cautious, rehearsed. The door handle turned, my grandson's small fingers intertwined with mine, and I didn't flinch, not even for a second. The door opened slowly, the way someone opens a room they think they already own. Michael stepped in first, not hurried, not hesitant, just composed, too composed. His expression was carefully arranged, the kind of face people wear when they've practiced it in the mirror first. Behind him, Leela followed, arms folded loosely, posture soft, voice ready before the words even had breath. She always understood performance better than truth. They both stopped when they saw the lockbox on the dresser, not because they knew what was inside, but because they recognized intent. Things left in plain sight can speak louder than anything hidden. "Dad," Michael began, his tone trained, warm but hollow. A tone meant to disarm, a tone meant to sell something. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted him to hear the silence between us. Silence has weight, and tonight it weighed heavier than any word I could have said. Leela stepped forward slightly, offering a gentle smile, the kind people use when they're about to take something from you and want you to feel grateful for it. "We were just thinking," she said,
each word smooth, practiced, that it might be a good idea to help make things easier for you. You've been working so hard for so long, Henry. You deserve rest, stability. Stability. A beautiful word until it's used to cage someone. Michael nodded in agreement, placing his hand over his heart as if he could fool himself into sincerity. We care about you, and we want to make sure everything is handled properly. You don't need to deal with paperwork and stress anymore. We can take care of it. You can just relax. Relax. The word sat in the air like something sour.
My grandson sat close beside me, silent, watching. He was learning, not from their words, but from the spaces between them. I spoke finally, voice calm, tone level. You've already discussed this. It wasn't a question, it was recognition. A flicker crossed Michael's face, small but visible. Lila's eyes tightened just enough to betray surprise. People believe betrayal is a moment, but it's not. It's a series of small choices, each one quieter than the last, until one day there's nothing left to hide behind. Michael took another step in. "Dad," he said, softer now, "we're just doing what's practical. You're not getting younger. Things happen. We just want to make sure everything is in the right hands." The right hands. His hands. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. I didn't even blink. My hands built all of this, I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. The words didn't echo, they landed. Lila exhaled, long, slow, calculated. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, neatly organized, pre-tabbed, prepared well before this conversation ever began. The documents. She placed them on the bed beside me, open, ready, pen already clipped to the page. She didn't say, "Sign." She didn't have to. Michael stepped closer and placed a small white pill bottle on the nightstand, casually, as if it was nothing. But he didn't look at me when he did it. He looked at my grandson. Just a glance, but it told me everything. Not only had they planned this, they had expected him to watch. They were teaching him what power looks like. They thought this was strength. I reached forward and closed the folder. Slowly, deliberately. No anger, no tremor in my hands, no fear. Then I spoke, as steadily as the heartbeat that had carried me 52 years. You should both sit down. Not a threat, not a request. A statement from a man who had already decided how tonight would end. They didn't move, but I could feel the shift in the air, the control they thought they had beginning to slip, grain by grain. There are nights when destiny changes quietly. This was one of them. Michael did not sit. He stood there, in the center of the room, still believing this was a conversation he was directing. Still believing age meant weakness. Still believing time had worn me down instead of sharpening me. Leela remained near the doorway, her arms crossed loosely, but her posture had changed. The softness was gone. Her eyes were sharper now, watching every movement, every breath, calculating outcomes. She thought she was studying me, but it was my silence studying her. My grandson stayed close beside me, shoulder touching my arm, not clinging, just present. A child who understood far more than a child should. The folder lay between us all, like a line drawn in the earth. Not paper, revelation. I built this house.
I said, not looking at them, but at the dresser, the bed frame, the walls, the boards I nailed, the joints I sanded, the foundation I poured with my own hands. They followed my gaze, and that, more than anything, made something inside Michael twist. He knew the truth of it. He had seen me come home with dust on my hair, concrete on my boots, bruises blooming under my shirt like purple storms. He had seen me break myself to build something for him. But time can turn memory into entitlement. He remembered the result, not the cost. You think this house is just walls, I said, but this house is every year I didn't give up. The room didn't move, the air didn't shift, but something in them faltered. They had expected resistance. They had not expected resolve. Leela stepped forward now, slow and controlled, the way someone approaches a wild animal they believe is tired enough not to bite. "Henry," she said, her voice measured, "we understand you're emotional, but we're trying to help you. You should be with family, living peacefully, not dealing with business stress and asset management. Let us take the burden. Let us handle things now." Burden. That was the word she chose, as though my life's work was weight and not legacy, as though love, sacrifice, and survival were things that needed to be lifted off me like old boxes in an attic. I stood then, slow, unhurried, deliberate, not to intimidate, not to threaten, but because I wanted them to see, truly see, that I was not frail, not fading, not finished. And in my silence, they realized that tonight was not unfolding the way they prepared for. I walked to the dresser and placed my hand on the lockbox. Michael's eyes locked on it instantly, not on me, on it. And that was when I finally understood the depth of it. This wasn't about security, or planning, or ensuring my comfort. This was hunger. Hunger dressed in responsibility. Hunger masked as care. Hunger that had been fed too long. I turned back toward them with the box in my hand. Michael spoke then, voice tighter now, less rehearsed, more real. "Dad, don't make this difficult." There it was, not a request, a warning. Once, that tone might have broken something inside me, but tonight, nothing broke. I set the lockbox on the bedside table next to the closed folder. 2 symbols, 2 futures. I looked at my grandson not with fear, but with clarity. Because legacy is not what you leave behind when you're gone. Legacy is who learns from you while you're still here. The house creaked softly, the sound of weight shifting, of steps repositioning, of decisions solidifying in places too deep to undo. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, gentle and indifferent, the same way life moves whether we protest or not. I sat back down slowly, my grandson's small hand returning to mine, fitting exactly where it belonged. Then I spoke, not louder, but with a certainty that could not be moved. "We're not done here." And the night, which had been waiting so patiently, finally exhaled. Henry stood in front of the old house, the one he had once planned to give to Ethan, the one that now felt like a graveyard of memories. The winter air was sharp, every breath leaving a cold mark in his chest. The sun was setting, coloring the cracked windows in faded gold. Silence surrounded everything, but inside Henry's heart there was still a storm, quiet now, but real.
Ethan and Grace were gone. Not forever, but out of his life. No fights, no revenge, no dramatic ending, just distance. Henry had finally learned not every wound needs to be answered. Some wounds are simply walked away from. A soft hand wrapped around Henry's fingers. Lily's tiny grip, warm. She was the only part of Ethan that was pure. Her voice was gentle. "Grandpa, are we going to live here now?" Henry looked down at her, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes didn't feel heavy. Not here. Not anymore. He took her to the car. A new place waited, not rich, not grand, not perfect, but free. Sometimes peace is not found in winning. Sometimes peace is found in leaving. Weeks passed. Henry's life settled into a simple rhythm. Morning tea near the window. Lily laughing in the small garden. The quiet sound of birds where there used to be arguments, accusations, and doubt. The world did not change, but Henry did. One evening, as the sky turned violet, Henry watched Lily drawing on the floor. She was sketching a family. A tall man. A small girl, smiling. Just two. Not three. Lily looked up, her eyes reflecting something soft, something honest. "Grandpa, why do people hurt the ones they love?" Henry knelt beside her. He did not answer with pain. He did not answer with bitterness. He answered with the truth he earned through suffering. Because they forget love is not something you take. It's something you protect. Lily leaned into him. "Then we will protect ours, right?" Henry smiled, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, where the wounds have finally stopped bleeding. Always. Time moved forward. Ethan watched from far away, always trying to call, always too late to fix what had already healed. Grace tried to justify, tried to explain, tried to soften the memory, but some things never soften. Regret is a heavy thing, and they now carried it. Henry didn't hate them. He simply outgrew the world where their betrayal had power. Because sometimes winning is simply choosing not to go back.